So welcome everybody. Some of you may know that this is the third class in the Introduction to Mindfulness Meditation. It's perfectly fine if you haven't been at the earlier ones. Just be building on what we've done before, but I'll also be reviewing what we talked about before. So here at IMC, we teach mindfulness in a particular progression. It doesn't have to be taught this way. There's plenty of, perfectly viable, legitimate ways to teach it. But how we teach it here is, I think Gil Fronstall came up with this, maybe even a few decades ago, this idea that I really like. And that is this idea of practice as having concentric circles. So in the center is a little more stable. Then as you get rings around that, these kind of get a little bit more wobbly. So in the center is mindfulness of breathing, just of the experience of breathing. It's always available. We're always breathing, or you hope so, right? And then a little bit out there is the body. This is also stable, right? The body is always available, and it's especially stable compared to the third ring, which is emotions. It's what we're going to talk about tonight. And then the fourth is thoughts, right? The world of thoughts is like, right? We always are getting pushed around by them, and it's very slippery, and it tends to be the least, I'm using this word, stable. So on the preceding weeks, we talked about mindfulness of breathing and mindfulness of the bodily experience. And what I'd like to highlight is that it's so much about experience, sensations, as opposed to thoughts or ideas. And sometimes we kind of get confused, like we think that it's about sensations, but not recognizing that it's actually, we're thinking. And next week we'll talk a little bit more about thinking. But when we do mindfulness, it can be like done without any words. Like the experience can be without words. It's just the experience of, for example, feeling like the chest expand and release the stretch. Just these movements, or maybe with breathing the belly goes in and out, or maybe you feel the temperature of the air going in and out of the nose. So it's not so much the concept or the idea of breathing, because breathing, it's not so much what we experience. Instead, we're experiencing the movement of the body in these different ways. So we start with mindfulness of breathing, and we're having the breath, and we're using this word anchor, and then the mind wanders. This is what minds do. And then we just very simply come back to the breath. The mind wanders, we come back to the breath. The mind wanders, we come back to the breath. It doesn't matter how many times you have to do this. In the beginning, it'll be a lot, where the mind is perhaps maybe even wandering more than it's even on the breath. That's fine. That's how it is when we start. It's always like this. And then with mindfulness of the body, what we're pointing to is we have the anchor here of the breath, resting attention on the sensations of breathing. And then let's say there's a compelling bodily sensation. Just discomfort in the back. I'm just making this up. And then you might feel like, I can't be with the breath because my back really hurts. And we just try to keep on being with the back. But then being with the breath. And we're thinking about the back, and then want to be with the breath. And in the back, and then we're going to be with the breath. So instead of getting into a wrestling match or struggling with this, we just let go of using the breath as the anchor and turn towards having the experience in the back be the anchor. And we feel it. This might be exactly what you do not want to do, but it turns out that to actually be with our experience is a way to have more freedom with them, to no longer be pushed around by them, and to have a different relationship to our experience. And we might say that mindfulness practice is all about changing our relationship to what's happening. So we turn towards the experience of, in my example, what's happening in the back. And if we were to use words, they would be adjectives. Stabbing, throbbing, pinching, hot, cold, vibrant, or something like this. So we're just noticing the uncomfortable experience in the back. We're not thinking about it, but the mind will want to go into a story. Oh my gosh, this thing in my back, probably I'm going to have to check in with the chiropractor as I get home. Why did I decide to go to a mindfulness class anyway? Or, something like this, right? There'll be stories that will happen. As best we can, we just let those go to the background, be with the experience in the back until it's either no longer compelling, it just kind of diminishes. This happens. Not always. It does happen though. And then come back to the sensations of breathing. Or maybe you're with the back and it's uncomfortable and the mind just goes off into fantasy or something about this and you completely forget that you're meditating. And then you wake up, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing that meditation thing. Then start back with the breath. And then when the body is compelling, turn towards the body. When it's no longer compelling, turn towards the breath. So we're just very easily, gently going back and forth between these different experiences. So now I'd like to introduce this idea of how to have mindfulness of emotions, because mindfulness practice includes all of our lives, all of it. There's nothing left out. Emotions are a part of the human experience, of course it is. So how can we bring mindfulness to emotions? Well, first of all, I'll say that emotions have two components, at least two components. Often we tend to think, again, I'll just use this as an example, sadness. We tend to think like, oh, I'm just sad, and I'm sad because I have this grief, this terrible loss that happened in my life. Of course I'm sad. But emotions have more than one component. They have this somatic signature, and they have a mental aspect, thoughts. Somatic signature is sadness. How does it feel in the body? Like, how do you know you're sad? For example, very often there'll be like this heaviness in the shoulders, kind of like maybe a little bit of a slumping, and there can be maybe pressure behind the eyes, maybe even feeling like tears are rising, but there can be a kind of like this little bit of a collapsing of the posture. Maybe there's a lump in the throat, something like this. And the mind is saying, oh, it's so sad that so-and-so is sick in the hospital, or so-and-so died, or whatever it might be that we're sad about. And we're going to let the thoughts just take care of themselves. They're going to want to hijack the experience, and that's okay. We'll just let them take care of themselves, and we are going to pay attention to the bodily experience of the emotions. And partly because the bodily experiences, they move at a different tempo as thoughts, right? I mean, what's happening in the body is more stable, it's slower, it's more tangible, like we can feel it, we can like really get an experience of what it's like. Unlike the thoughts, which are, running really quickly and going all over the place, the past, the future, all kinds of things. So in some ways that I think about this is that we are like translating emotional experiences into bodily experiences, being with the experience of the body. And in this way, we actually are honoring and respecting our bodily experience. We're not suppressing our emotions. We're not pretending that they're not there. We're not trying to wish that they were different or anything like this. We are actually being with our emotional life. And this alone can add so much freedom to one's life. What would it be like if you felt comfortable with all emotions? You didn't have to, move away from them or avoid them. You could have difficult conversations. You could have tender conversations. You could comfort people in the midst of their terrible grief. You could hold your own grief. Adds a lot of freedom to our lives because we start to notice how much that we're trying to avoid emotions or trying to only have particular emotions and have more of those. But it doesn't work that way, right? We don't get to control our emotional life. We try. But when we're trying to only have certain emotions, there's a way in which there's this kind of like a shutting down of our experience. So mindfulness of the emotions is this way that allows us to no longer be in conflict with our emotional life and to have some confidence with regards to our emotional life. But maybe importantly, it allows us to have some intimacy with our life. There's this way in which if we're trying to avoid our emotions that we're a little bit disconnected from ourselves, from others perhaps. And then our life just is kind of like passing us by. This way in which we feel like, and I don't know, like it's not very satisfying our life. But to be present for our inner life brings this richness and fullness of the human experience. Emotions are an integral part of our lives. Of course it is. So it can be transformative. There's this way in which also turning towards and honoring and respecting, like, yes, this is what anger feels like. I have this heat in my face. I feel like my legs, my arms want to move. There's this restlessness here, and maybe like the chest gets puffed out a little bit too, and like some of these subtle things. And we think about with emotions, they can show up. But if there's this way in which we can be with our emotions, they can evolve. There's this way in which they have the freedom to arise, be present, and then pass away. This is the nature of emotions. To just arise and pass away. And the physiologists tell us and the neurologists tell us, right, emotions really only last 90 seconds. And you're like, wait, I've been sad for longer than 90 seconds. I've been sad for days, weeks, months, years, even. Well, what happens is it's like the sadness arises, and then we get tangled up with it, and it's the getting tangled up with it that causes it to persist. Oh no, I wish the sadness weren't here. I'm always sad. I'm going to be sad again. Everybody else is having a good time and I'm not. Maybe I should do that thing I saw in that YouTube video where, I don't know. Maybe I should go learn to meditate. I don't know. Something like this. But there's often this subtle way in which we're trying to make them be different or go away, or it's often not even noticed that we get tangled up with it. And it's the tangled up-edness that perpetuates the emotions. So instead they can arise and pass away. And so how can we allow them to be there so that they aren't persisting, is to just be with the bodily experience. And I'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. So maybe one more thing I'll say before I do a guided meditation is our relationship to emotions in general will show up in this way. We might not be aware of it. It might not be obvious. It might not even be, I'll say this, it might be very subtle. But for some people, they are emotional about emotions. They think that it's the true expression of who they are, and they should announce and share all their emotions at all the time. I feel this way, and therefore this should happen, and now I feel this way, and therefore that should happen. On the other end of the spectrum is like, emotions, they are a pain. I try not to have any of them. In fact, I'm not even sure if I do have them. So we have these two ends of the spectrum. These are two legitimate ways. Depends on, so many things. It depends on which attitude towards emotions that you have. But if you're on the different extremes, I would like to encourage just a movement more towards the center, where because some of the most beautiful, sublime experiences of our lives are emotions. When babies are born, right? Kind of like newborn babies, that emotion, or love, falling in love, or the love that we have for others, or also, fear, right? It's very frightening. Of course it is. So the encouragement here is just to recognize that you will have a relationship towards emotions, and can we move towards the center. Like, we don't have to express every emotion, and we don't have to pretend like we don't. I'm saying the word pretend. A lot of people are just not aware of their emotions. Okay, so with that, we're going to do a little bit of a guided meditation here. So let's take an alert posture that expresses your intention to meditate, and also has some ease. Has some uprightness. The spine is upright. If your body allows it, it can be helpful to not be using the backrest in the chair, but to be sitting upright. And then to connect to this experience of sitting right now, part of that is we can connect to the sitting surface. If you're using the backrest, feel the pressure on your back from the chair. Feeling the pressure on the buttocks from the chair or the cushion. Feeling the pressure on the back of the legs, the feet. We're here. I'll do a small little body scan to check in with some common areas of tightness or tension. The eyes, around the eyes. The jaw, We're just noticing, what do they feel like, the eyes and the jaw? It might be that bringing our attention to those areas allows some softening of tension. Relaxing the shoulders, letting the shoulder blades slide down the back. And then you can just check in, like, what is your emotional state like right now? What is your mood? What are the feelings? And then you can notice how you're feeling about how you're feeling. Your relationship to whatever the emotional state is right now. And if it's not clear, your emotional state, can you be okay with that? With it not being clear? And then we'll bring our attention to the sensations of breathing. Feeling the belly moving in and out with the breath. Or feeling the chest stretch and the release of the stretch. Or feeling the air moving in and out of the nose. Whichever of those three, choosing one of those three areas, and just resting attention there. Breathing naturally, the body knows how to breathe. We don't need to change the breath in any way. We're just noticing the sensations, the experience of breathing. We're just hanging in there with the rhythm of breathing. you discover that you're lost in thought, just very simply, gently begin again with the sensations of breathing. Nothing in particular needs to be happening. We're just here, now, noticing the sensations of breathing. Letting the thoughts just be in the background and being with what it feels like to have an inhale. What it feels like to have an exhale. And now, you can let go, having attention on breathing. And again, notice the emotional state, the mood or feeling that is present. Very simply offering it a kind of simple awareness. And see if you can discover where in your body that emotional state or mood or feeling is experienced. What sensations in your body that you know that you're having that emotional state? This might be subtle. Might be vague. Can you make a distinction between experiences in the body and what's the mental events that are happening? We're turning towards the bodily experience. And then again, kind of rest your attention on the sensations of breathing. So we're putting like the breath at the center, and often starting with the breath is a way that can allow the body and the mind to settle down. Maybe with a little bit of a body scan to notice if there are some areas that are uncomfortable. And then just to rest there with the bodily experience until something becomes compelling. And this could be a bodily, discomfort in the body, often joy too, or there can be this energetic uplift, joy and happiness. This absolutely isn't part of this path of practice. It absolutely is. Experience that as well. But there's this way in which we can use the stability that we discover with the mindfulness of breathing to help us create the container, so to speak, in which we can be with the emotions. And emotions are often felt, not exclusively, but often felt in the face and in the torso. Chest, throat, belly, face, these types of things. And sometimes it can be a little bit tricky with emotions because we want to resist them or judge them. We want to do anything except have a simple awareness of them. But turning towards the bodily experience is a way in which we can have this more simple relationship and experience of emotions. And with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions or comments about anything I've said. And I'd love to hear a little bit like how that meditation was for you. Was that obvious, this whole idea of looking for the bodily, I like this expression, the somatic signature of the emotions in the bodily experience, or was that perplexing? And Sally's getting the microphone for us. Does anybody have any comments about what I said, or how was that meditation? I think You can see that that's the green, yeah, and then this probably, I think it's on. So, yeah, here's a great question. You have to push the button, you know this, right? Poor Sally, she's... Is it on? Nope, so on the side, there's a little button on the side. Push that until, there you go.
So in my case, it was a little bit difficult to identify the emotion, but once I felt it, I was just like, I just wanted to start crying. And then when you said that we should come back to our breathing, it was very difficult for me to let that emotion go. Like I was probably like blocking the emotion or not letting it feel it completely. But once I started feeling it, it was very difficult for me to come back. So I just found that interesting.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel now at this moment?
I feel fine. Yeah, I feel good. I feel relieved in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a surprise for you, the crying and the...
Yeah, I was not expecting that at all.
Yeah, thank you. This can happen, right? I like this expression, like emotions kind of like bubble up. And even when we create the conditions, when there's some quietness, they bubble up. And there's a way that I think about it. It's kind of like they get metabolized in some kind of way when they get seen and acknowledged, and maybe they let themselves know a little bit more, and then they often just go on their way. Yeah. Thank you.
So I think you mentioned that think of what emotions you have at the moment. If you don't know, I think you said it's just okay to say unknown. I think that I don't remember the exact words, but you said that. That can help a lot, because many times I don't know really how I'm feeling when I look at it, and I can't label it specifically as something. That instruction was helpful. I think my mind automatically labels certain sensations in my stomach as bad, right? It just has that. So feeling the sensation, oh, that's bad, I need to avoid it. That association seems very, very deep. So irrespective of what I'm doing, if that's happening, I think it's a bad sensation. I don't know what comes first. Is it the negative thing in the brain that causes the stomach? Is it the stomach that causes the brain? Or do they happen together? It's very perplexing.
It's a fantastic thing to practice with, to get curious about it. Like, what's happening first here? Is it the sensation in the belly and then the mind, or the mind or the belly? It's a great thing to just, bring some curiosity to. Not so much that you have to find the answer, but rather than me just telling you something, just to experience and see how it is. And then with regard to having, I think I used something like vagueness of the emotion or something like this. Yeah. It can be helpful to maybe have a sense of, maybe I'll say this. Sometimes I wouldn't know what I was feeling, and I liked this expression, out of sorts. Just out of sorts. I don't know what it is. It's just out of sorts. So sometimes it would be helpful just to acknowledge there's something there, but I don't know what it is. Or there could be some other kind of vague label of, I don't know, but it's delightful, or something like this. So there can be, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, it can be helpful to have some specificity of our emotions, but if it's not helpful to try to figure it out and dig and oh my gosh, I got to get to the bottom of this. That's not what we're doing. So if it's just not clear, then to be okay with the vagueness. But if there feels like there can be some clarity, to bring some clarity to it. Is that helpful, kind of what I'm pointing to? Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else have a comment or something they'd like to say? Questions? For anybody, was this a new idea to have emotions in the body? For me, it certainly was. I'm trained as a scientist. I've spent my whole life, preceded in my mind. And then to this, it was just such an odd idea. What do you mean emotions are in the body? But I discovered that it turns out to be true. was a little bit of a process to kind of like just become acquainted with. And I was, there's a, maybe back there, but while the microphone is traveling, I'll just say that they've given like pieces of paper that have like a silhouette of a human body, and they ask people to color in, where is, this emotion, where is madness, where's anger, where is joy, where is envy, where is, just all these emotions. And there wasn't 100% concordance, but there is this general feeling, as I said, kind of like in the face and in the torso. So if you ask people, they can often point to them. So, yes.
You have a beautiful way of explaining this in such detail that it's so helpful for me, especially when you talked about not getting entangled in the thoughts. It's like it gave me permission not to, become obsessed with my thoughts of the day. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I was able to really come down. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Next week I'll talk a little bit more about this, but there is a way in which we think that our thoughts are the absolute most important thing that are always happening. And our thoughts are important. I'm not going to say that they're not, but so many of the things we think about, you think about them, the first 1,227 times you think about it is enough. We don't have to continue thinking about things. So.
And I think it's like, holding on to the busyness, right? Because we're all like working a lot in this area. And so you sit here and you're kind of like, oh, I'm familiar with this kind of feeling. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else have a comment or a question, or would you like to share how that meditation was, or maybe all the way over here?
Thanks. I think you asked twice during that meditation about what was the emotion that you were thinking. The first time the emotion came up, and it instantly manifested itself into a kind of pressure on my eyes, behind my eyes, kind of the weird light show and darkness and stuff going on, and then the second time was just a heaviness on my chest. Same emotion, but two different ways that it manifests itself. So the question I have is, then I was concentrating more on the bodily, the feeling, the heaviness and such, and not so much on the emotion anymore. Is that helping work through the emotion that you're trying to work through, or I guess that's a question that I have.
This is a legitimate question. So I would say that actually this heaviness in the chest, for example, is the emotion. It is the emotion. These are not separate things. To have this bodily experience and to have an emotion, heaviness in the chest, pressure behind the eyes, that's emotions. They're actually kind of like primarily bodily experiences, it turns out. But I appreciate what you're saying also. I think you're pointing to this, it's not uncommon to have the idea of like, but no, I need to get in there with the emotion and somehow work with it or understand it or do something with it. There's often this idea. You didn't say this, so I don't know if you specifically have this. Right? This is, of course, because we have, psychology, a lot that's telling us that this is, beneficial. And I am going to say it is helpful and beneficial, but that's not what we're doing in meditation. And it turns out that these emotions can resolve themselves if we give them the conditions in which they can. I'm not saying it's fast, and I'm not saying it's always easy or it's straightforward, but there's a way in which the emotions can I'll use this word, metabolize or shift or change without our having to get to the bottom of them or completely understand them or connect them to that thing that happened when we were a kid. So psychology is helpful and beneficial and sometimes is exactly what's needed. But meditation offers an alternative way. And so I'll just share this. And sometimes it's helpful to, like, we don't want to tip into overwhelm. That's not the direction we're going. So if we're like, it's swimming in this ocean of grief, and like we turn towards the emotion and the bodily experience, and it just, this huge well comes up, we can see, like, can we hold it? Can we be like, wow, this is really strong. Wow, this is like just maybe, often kind of like there's these waves, like with sadness sometimes, that there might be tears and maybe a little bit of sobbing. If you can stay with the bodily experience, that's great. But if you can't and you're starting to feel like, oh my God, this is too much, I just can't handle it, that's not the direction we want to go. It's not so helpful. So I would say just open your eyes. Feel the pressure against the body, like what you're sitting on. Feel your feet like, no, I'm here now. And if it's a particularly emotionally labile time for you, it can be helpful to, even before you start the meditation, to look around the room. And like, let's say you're in your meditation posture at home or here or wherever it is, and just identify like some things that are pleasing. These like completely mundane, pleasing. I'm looking at this chair. It's kind of nice how it has shiny legs. And I'm looking at this cushion here. It has this softness to it that feels like it might be comfortable in some kind of way. And I'm appreciating this sinew of this wire that's back there on the back wall. So these are such mundane things that we don't usually pay attention to, but it can be helpful to like notice some things that are pleasing, mundane and pleasing before we start our meditation. And then if we feel like, we tip into overwhelm, to open our eyes and then connect with these objects again. This is a way to help kind of remind us, like, no, we're here now, so that we don't find ourselves. I'm using this word overwhelm. I don't know if there's, like, tipping into overwhelm. I don't know if there's a better word, but something like that. So I want to talk about another tool that you can use, a specific tool that you can use for working with emotions that can be really helpful. So a tool is just like, something that's in a toolbox. You take it out and you use it if it's helpful. If it's not helpful, you just leave it in the toolbox. So in the same way, this will be this idea. This was developed by Tanya Weiser, who teaches here on Thursdays, and Gil Fronsdal. And it has this very nice acronym, RAFT, R-A-F-T. And some of you may know, like this, a raft is what carries you over the flood, over to safety. This is a common metaphor that's used in Buddhist teachings. So RAFT, R, stands for recognize. Just recognize the emotion that's happening. Sadness, out of sorts, delight, whatever it is. You can use a simple word, just a little bit of a note. Yep, it's anger, joy, delight, envy, whatever it might be. The A is for allow. That emotion is already there. You are already experiencing it. Can you allow it to be there because it is already there. There's often this way in which we kind of like want to push things away because we feel like then we'll make it go away, or if we ignore it, it'll go away. This is my favorite tactic, right? I used to like just try to ignore it always. But if we can allow it to be there, there's this way in which we are aligning with the reality of the moment. The reality of the moment is that that emotion has arisen. That emotion is being experienced. That emotion is known. And can we maybe stop with, often there's this subtle way in which we're pushing them away, or we're wanting more of them, or we're getting tangled up with them. Instead, can there be this movement towards openness and like, yes, this envy is here right now. It doesn't, you can have any emotion, right? Any emotion. It doesn't mean that we're going to jump out of our meditation posture and go out and express them. And I mean, we can have murderous rage, we can have such incredible anger, but we're not going to act out them. We're meditating. We're going to stay in our meditation posture and allow the emotion to be known and felt and experienced. So this might be the only place in our lives in which we have complete permission to feel whatever there is to be felt. Often we feel like, we should only feel certain emotions and in certain settings or something like this. But you have complete permission to feel whatever there is. Include vagueness of not knowing. So just to allow it to be there. This allowing is pointing to having some, for the moment, for that just moment, just recognize, yep, it feels like this and it's here. So F is it feels like this, and the F is feel in the body. Feel the lump in the throat, feel the heat in the face, feel those, maybe there's a sense of wanting to get up and run or something like this. Restlessness can feel and sometimes in the arms or this leg or the legs. And there's this way, if we can rest our attention on the bodily experience, as I've been saying, it takes the authority and the momentum out of what's happening in the mind. And the mind is making all kinds of stories about, if only that thing didn't happen, next time I see that person, I'm going to do this, or I don't know. There's so many things. So we're either rehashing what happened, or we're planning the future, or, around this, or we're saying, oh my gosh, this means that I'm a bad person because I'm having this emotion. We're making those stories. It's quite something. The mind likes to take emotions and really run with them. We're just going to let that happen more in the background. And again, just turn towards the bodily experience. So feel in the body. Recognize, allow, feel in the body. And then T, there's two different ways that we can think about T, and I'll give both of them. One is to tease apart. Tease apart the emotion. Let's just say it's anger. Tease apart the experience of being angry from our ideas or commentary or our notion about what it means to be angry. I shouldn't be angry. They didn't really know that they were being so rude and obnoxious, and I shouldn't be mad, or maybe we're working ourselves up like, oh my gosh, I still can't believe this happened, and I'm going to do something else. Whatever it is, to tease apart the actual anger from our reaction to the anger, our commentary about the anger. Often these get conflated, and this is how the tangled upness happens and the emotions get perpetuated. So to notice, what emotion do we have about the emotion? If, I'm just going to make this up again, let's say there's anger, and then we just have this shame about anger. Then we can just turn towards shame. That's the new emotion. Let the anger do whatever the anger is going to do, and then feel the shame. Oh yeah, okay, there's shame here. Feels like heaviness on the shoulders and small little knot in the gut or something like this. So the T can be tease apart, the emotion from the reaction to the emotion, and it might be that the reaction is another emotion. That's not a problem. Just turn towards that emotion and do the same thing. Recognize, allow, feel in the body. Tease apart. And you might notice that there's hatred, and then hatred of the hatred, and then there's hatred of the hatred of the hatred, and then there's hatred of the hatred of the hatred of the hatred, and off you go. That's okay. Just, yep, hatred feels like this. So that's one way. The T can be teasing apart the emotion. I'm saying this a number of times because often people will ask me, now what were we teasing apart again? The emotion from our reaction. That's one way we can understand T. Here's a second way we can understand this letter T. Trust. Can we trust that at that precise moment, we don't have to fix it at that precise moment? We don't have to jump up and do something, because that'll be the impulse often, right? It's like, I have to make this go away. It needs to be different. I have to fix it. I got to send that email. I have to, I don't know. Or we just maybe just want to just simply jump away from experiencing it. Can we trust that moment? It doesn't have to be fixed. Just at that moment. It may get fixed later, but at that moment when we're experiencing it. This is related to allowing. And something happens when we can kind of like trust and put down and soften the wrestling that we do. Then there's some wisdom often arises when we kind of like open to the experience. There's a little bit more space for a new way of seeing things, a new idea, a new interpretation, something that wasn't seen before, that can really shift our relationship, shift our understanding. So trust that you don't have to do anything at precisely that moment. Maybe you can trust, maybe there's something that's meaningful for you that's bigger than you. Trust the universe. Trust your favorite deity. Trust. In Buddhism, we have like the refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Maybe that's meaningful for you. Is there what it's pointing to here, this trust, is the movement away from, oh, I'm feeling this terrible thing and I have to fix it. The trust is moving in the opposite direction. Recognize, allow, feel in the body, tease apart the emotion from our reaction to the emotion, and trust it's okay at that moment. Our capacity is so much more than we give ourselves credit for. It really is. It really is. Okay, so I'm going to do another short little guided meditation. If you'd like to stand up for a moment, just to kind of like stretch your legs before you or have to sit again, it can be helpful so we don't get too tense. Okay. So, taking a meditation posture. And I'm going to begin with something that we did last week. And that is just encourage you to bring your attention to the sensations in your left hand. What the hand is touching, what it feels like to have a left hand, And I'm pointing to the left hand with the assumption that it's neutral experience for you. If it's not neutral, then choose another area in the body. What is it like to just feel the hand? Allowing the hand to show itself to you. Independent of any commentary you might have, independent of what you're thinking. Just the experience of having the left hand. Maybe there's tingling, pulsing, heaviness, vibration. Just allowing those sensations to be there. And then in the same way, can you bring that kind of attention to the emotional experience, emotion and attitude, mood? Might be subtle. As if it were okay for that experience to be there. Can you recognize what the emotion is? Just use a very simple label. Sadness, happiness, delight, boredom, frustration. Can you just allow that emotion to be there? Can we just let it be without adding anything to it, without insisting or wishing that it were different? Just allowing. And then feeling again into the body, the bodily experience of this emotion. How does it feel? What are the sensations? And can you tease apart the emotion from the mental events that are surrounding it? The commentary we might have about it. Can you tease those apart? Can you trust that it doesn't have to be fixed, it doesn't have to be different at this moment? And rest attention on the sensations of breathing. So this idea of RAFT, recognize, allow, feel in the body, tease apart, and trust. Doesn't have to be in that order. It's a nice acronym, but maybe you can just be recognizing like, oh yeah, there's that frustration again. And maybe sometimes just like acknowledging it is sufficient, and it just kind of peters out. Or there might be a way in which we just feel it in the body first. And when there's a sense of, oh wow, I don't really know what this is, but there's something like a tightness in the chest or a knot in the gut or something like this. And then maybe it was just allowing that bodily sensation to be there. And then there's some recognition. Oh yeah, this is shame or sadness or whatever it might be. So the point here is not to figure everything out, which is often what we like to do. We like to figure things out. We like to understand them. They feel more manageable. And certainly that has its place. But the emphasis with this practice is to experience them. Because there's this way in which when we're figuring them out, is we're kind of like shoving them to the side while we're trying to figure them out. There's a way in which we're figuring them out as a way to not experience them. Or, we're kind of like moving away from experience and running to concepts like, oh, that must be because of X, Y, or Z that happened in my life. I'm not saying those things aren't true. I'm saying that this is a different way that turns out to be enormously powerful and transformative. To just, as best we can, to be with our experience. So I'd like to open it up for questions again, to see if there's any comments or questions about what I've said so far. There's right next to you, Sally.
Thank you, Diana. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what freedom feels like. We talk a lot about freedom when we talk about meditation. Specifically, let's say dealing with grief. It becomes this thing you carry with you all the time for a long period of time. So I find that inquiring or sitting with your emotions or noting, for instance, I was trying noting today, and it suddenly, that itself is overwhelming to see what a mess you are. Like, what are the things that are going on inside of you, So then the question becomes, okay, where is the freedom? So I know my emotions, but where is that? And also about relating. So how am I relating to it, really? Thank you.
Yeah. I'll say a few things about the freedom. What happens is a few things. One is emotions arise, grief. It's felt, and it's not a problem. It's just grief. It's grief. It feels like this, and it's not a problem. So none of the emotions are a problem. And this is where freedom is. It's not like where we have to avoid anything. It's like we have the capacity to be with anything. And then then we start to recognize like how much of our life we're trying to make sure we only have certain emotions and not other emotions. But with this, we learned that we can have any. And a second way is a big part about mindfulness practice, not just what I've been talking about tonight, but just in general, is we start to gain some more clarity and maybe seeing a little bit more deeper about our inner life. And that includes noticing, yes, there's a lot of grief, for example. Grief is a natural thing. Of course, there's grief. There's loss when there's human life, and there's grief. This is the human experience. But there's also so many mundane, perfectly neutral things that are happening in our life that we often are just dismissing. Or there's often even little delight. For me, it's the first sip of coffee in the morning. I love coffee. I just love the first taste. It just makes me happy. just all these small little things that are even delightful, we tend to be dismissive of them. So the freedom starts to see like, oh yeah, there's a lot of grief, and there's other things happening too. So we're honoring, respecting the grief, but we're not letting like our entire experience kind of collapse into that. Does this make sense? Okay. Anybody else have a comment or a question? We have this here. Thank you for asking that question about freedom.
Thank you, Dana. Quick question on the labeling. Is it more helpful to label, or does it just get you lost in thought? Or is it more helpful just to stay?
Do you want to share a little bit what your experience was? Was this like you, well, okay. I think I know what you're pointing to, but do you want to say a little bit more?
So sometimes trying to figure it out mentally, that can cause me to, go on another roller coaster for a long time before I come back.
Yeah. So I would say it's helpful to gain familiarity or for our emotional vocabulary to kind of increase. And what we don't want to do is just as you described, like trying to like, oh, okay, now I have to figure this out. Does it feel, am I this or that or the other thing? So I know a number of people who have spent some time where, maybe you've heard of this, I don't know, starting with mad, sad, glad. Like, okay, maybe it's one of these three. It's, a variation of one of those. And they just start with that. It's mad, it's not mad, and I'm not sad, and I'm not glad. So, or I guess you have to choose one of those three as a family, an emotion that's in one of those three families. But then often there have been individuals who will look at a list of emotions and say, what does this one feel like? Not when they're meditating, but at another time. Jack Kornfield talks about this in one of his books, that he was a monk for quite some time in Thailand and in Burma. And then it wasn't until he came back to the United States that he realized that he really didn't know his emotions at all. And he spent time with lists of them. And that really helped him to kind of like broaden his awareness of what different things were. So this is one way to approach it. So I think it can be helpful to have some, like I said, is it in one of those three families, to start there, and then maybe just bring some curiosity throughout the day, not in meditation or other settings, to have a little bit of a sense of one's emotions without it having to turn into a big self-improvement project or, something like that. Maybe to bring some curiosity too.
So if I may just have two more follow-ups. One is that sometimes I get like random feelings that aren't associated tangibly with some mental formation, except for they cause discomfort. Right? Like I said, random feelings, say in the stomach, for example, in my case. So that's one thing. The other thing is, sometimes I have this irresistible urge to move, and I'm not able to pinpoint it to one specific part of my body. What is it that's just making me want to move, right? I mean, that's another.
Yeah. So I'll say that it turns out that they're not so random. There are emotions. And as the mind and the body start to settle, then we start to see connections that we don't see with just our regular mind. So that's one thing. And this wanting to move, could be countless reasons. And you could just label it restlessness. This often we say, oh, there's this restlessness. And then, okay, maybe that's something you could recognize, allow, feel in the body, and tease apart. Restlessness. Something like that. You're welcome. Okay, so we're a few minutes over. I want to let you all go, but I'll stay here. If some of you have some questions, you'd like to come up and ask me. Otherwise, I wish you a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you.